Well, all right. Hello, I am Tom.
I'm Johanan. Everyone else there? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Max Kobe from the Escaping Atheism Project.
I'm Jean Baptiste.
All right. Thank you guys for coming on board. Sadly, Deflating Atheism couldn't make it this week, but we'll see if we can schedule him another time. But for now, we have two new guests, John and Escaping Atheism Max. Glad to have you aboard. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, John?
I'm a nobody. I help Max on the Escaping Atheism project from time to time. And
Yep.
Well, you're somebody now. Just being on here is a really big help.
And you're an Orthodox Christian. He's an Orthodox Christian. He's a real smart guy.
That's great.
Good guy.
We need as
self-taught,
many.
though.
We need as many smart guys on here as we can. Yeah. And you, Max from Escaping Atheism, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we start?
Oh, I suppose I run the Escaping Atheism Project. I am a former atheist. I was an atheist for a really long time and a pretty serious-minded one. I had grown up in a sort of fundamentalist Christian Calvinist background and rejected that, and became agnostic, and then kind of atheist, and then very atheist, and then kind of became a philosophical theist, and eventually joined the church. So that's me. And then as an ex-atheist, I left atheism about 10 years ago, and I kind of assumed it would die down as a fad. And now what I see is that it's a very malevolent cultural force. I'm concerned for my kids, I'm concerned for my family, just because the anti-religious zealotry has gotten so great, and the emptiness of atheist arguments is so. Most atheist arguments are so vacuous. That's where the project was began. We don't do Christian apologetics, at least not directly, except incidentally to answer questions. Although most of us are Christians on the project, we aren't all, and that's who we are.
That's interesting. Oh yeah, this is very interesting. So we have an ex-atheist on here. That's great.
Oh yeah, I was a serious one too, real serious.
Interesting. So when you were an atheist, what was that like exactly? Could you give us a little detail about that?
What was it like? Well, I think it was more or less Penn Jillette, maybe Christopher Hitchens, and a few others who talked me into embracing the label and the philosophy. I had had a very bad negative upbringing, including negative experiences with religion and people throwing Jesus at me and harassing me and threatening me and all that sort of thing with hellfire and all that sort of thing. I rejected it all. I got seriously into science, science fiction, all that stuff. Read most of the big name atheists, and I decided it didn't make sense. You should take it seriously. Richard Dawkins made the case that you should take it seriously. And I said, yeah, he's probably right. If you're going to be an atheist, embrace this and learn what you can from scientific naturalism. Eventually, I couldn't sustain it anymore. And also the behavior of my fellow atheists and the blatantly false things I would see them saying or doing, and I would even catch them out on BS they would spout in science, and that's kind of what caused me to leave. That and just general poor behavior. Because atheists tend to get very abusive to people who spout the part, who deviate from their party line. They deny having a party line, but they got one. This is not necessarily true for the average, 19-year-old who knows nothing about religion kind of person. But at some point, especially when you get past a certain age or so, you've had opportunities to look into answers for your questions and you haven't tried. There's something problematic there. Atheism makes no sense, and the more I have examined it in the years since I abandoned it, the more obvious that becomes. I don't see how anybody intellectually honest. Atheism's a big ball of nothing, and as a cultural phenomenon, it's very negative, and that's what I see.
And that's the reason why you left it. You found they were spewing out anti-science and
Oh,
Is
they
that one
were
of the-
anti-science. They were very obviously anti-science. They will claim, and it's still true, they will claim to be the pro-science people, but they only accept any science that happens to match what they already want to think for the most part.
And this is firsthand experience from being around them?
Oh, yeah, from extensive experience of being an atheist, hanging with other atheists, and also the strange experience of being an ex-atheist and hanging with atheists and just not talking religion. And you hear some stuff out of people who are ideological atheists. It's astounding the utter contempt they hold, that they tend to hold for anybody who's a believer, is often staggering. And what's also staggering, like I was looking at this article that you wanted us to look at, idealists do not understand quantum mechanics. I am not into quantum mechanics. I mean, I'm not an expert. I know more than most people. But it doesn't matter, because just many of the statements in this article you can debunk just by asking someone.
Let's focus on this though, to like actually debunk them, because they need to be called out every time they do this. Like when they're going to use this kind of sophistic arguing to try and get away with their stuff if we don't blow them out of the water each time, you know.
I agree
yes.
with you, Johan.
Absolutely. We have Johanan, and this is one of Johan's requests to do this blog page of Anticitizenx, who I actually know through discussions on Facebook.
Hey, Johan, where do we find you? I'm sorry to interrupt. Where do we find your YouTube?
Just Johanan Rotz.
Johanan Rotz? Okay, we'll look for you.
Atheism and Johan and I, but you guys are new to this podcast right now. I felt that we need to stretch out our wings to go to other atheists, and we just chose Anticitizenx. For right now, we are just going to review this right now. Okay, did everyone pull up their own personal blog post on your own computers?
Yes, I'm looking at it now. Idealists do not understand quantum mechanics. Don't let me dominate the conversation, but I mean, right from the opening paragraphs, there's problems with what he's saying. So I don't know who wants to go to.
Let's look at number one.
Okay, let's just
let's just jump into the points here. All right, the heart and soul of all quantum mechanics is the Schrödinger equation. Correct. Real quantum mechanics is accomplished by modeling some potential function into the Schrödinger equation, applying boundary conditions, and then solving for the corresponding eigenvalues and eigenfunctions. Also correct. All right, you stick your energy value into the Schrödinger equation, solve, and then you can plug in different operators to find momentum and position and so on. Everything we know about the nature of the subatomic particles is more or less expressible within this framework. Yep.
No. Well,
basically correct. That actually is correct. I mean, there is. Yeah, that's correct.
Everything we know is the operant word there. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, from what I know of quantum, because I was taught quantum mechanics in school, and it's never been wrong once, right?
Right.
It's actually the most tested theory in all of science, and so yeah, that's a reasonable thing to say. Yet quantum idealists make absolutely no effort to express their ideas in the same way. It's because we're working at a conceptual level. See, this is okay. Hold on here. Let's finish this thought here. Quantum mechanics, therefore, cannot possibly support idealism because idealists are simply not doing quantum mechanics in any meaningful mathematical capacity. That's a non sequitur. That's a non sequitur. Just because
what's a mathematical formula to prove that he's winning an equation.
That's simply not true. I mean, yes, our videos. You see, the Schrödinger equation is tough stuff. It's differential calculus and so on, right? You don't do that. When have you ever seen Michio Kaku or Brian Greene or any of those people on television talking in detail about the Schrödinger equation? They may talk about it in passing, but they're going to talk about the conceptual level of quantum mechanics because you're talking to a lay audience, right?
Right.
So by that standard, I mean, they're not doing it either because they're not talking about those things. I mean, that's what they're doing in their office, when they're not presenting to the public, or when they teach to a class or something. But you're not dealing with. You're not teaching. Of course, we're not doing. I mean, I brought up the Schrödinger equation, I think, in one or two of my videos, right, in some mathematical level. But of course, I'm not using the Schrödinger equation in my videos because I'm talking to a lay audience. Okay, I don't have time to be teaching people differential equations and probability theory and all that stuff, Well,
and plus, how would you prove idealism or realism or materialism using equations, using the Schrödinger equation?
Well, you can. Well, see, here's the irony in all this.
And?
You can do exactly that. I mean, you saw we are referring to things that come from the Schrodinger equation. The Bell inequality, and specifically the Leggett inequality, which was used to violations that prove that realism is false, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those things come from the Schrodinger equation. So firstly, this is a non sequitur, okay? Just because idealists, right, who are not the theory of idealism, but idealists are not, using quantum mechanics in the Schrodinger equation sense in the context of these videos, not whatever else we're doing, doesn't mean that, therefore quantum mechanics does not support idealism or cannot possibly support idealism.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we actually do reference things that derive from the Schrodinger equation. And we do it all the time. It's just that, we don't go into the details of how the math is derived because, you give a mathematical proof of Leggett's inequality to the audience, they're not going to be interested. The audience isn't going to be interested in that. Now,
I would also note that many sources, like I know Inspiring Philosophy's done it. I'm pretty sure you have too. Is certainly others have copious references to the peer-reviewed data, which you can go to see.
Oh yeah, exactly. I've done that all over the place.
And then so the evidence is there. The equations are there.
Mm-hmm.
The pointed to papers you can go get.
Exactly. I've done that numerous times. And now what's funny about this is I call him my apprentice. It's kind of a joke. He's Dario Scotto, he's an atheist who got converted via the quantum idealism approach. He's actually converted by the digital physics argument before IP even made a video on it. Like that was the first guy I got with it.
Mm-hmm.
He has specialized it now, and he's actually making a mathematically precise version of it. And it uses the density matrix that you get from the wave function of the universe, which is derivable from the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, which is a version of the Schrodinger equation. And he then uses that density matrix to calculate or set up an equation to calculate the phi, or integrated information content, of the universal wave function. So very directly there, he goes from a Schrodinger equation to using the Schrodinger equation to calculate the density matrix, to using the density matrix to calculate the integrated information content of the universe, or the conscious state of the universe. The universe is being simulated in. So that's very directly false. I mean, yes, we're not doing that in our videos because our videos are not supposed to be there to, go into the mathematical nitty-gritty detail, but we're talking about the basic, conceptual ideas involved, which happen to be also modeled with the Schrodinger equation.
Hey, Jean, I think we keep hearing you inhale on something there. You might
It's my fan in the back. It's really hot. It's Southern California, so.
Okay, yeah. Not to
I'm really
Turn it off.
Yeah, just.
Is it better now?
No, just not to interrupt, but I think if we start with this this page right here, I think we should start with the beginning and read to the bottom so the viewers don't get confused or we read things out of context. Like I was a little lost what you were saying here, so can we
He was just talking about number one. It says the heart. He's going straight to the bullet points. Number one, the heart and soul of all quantum mechanics is the Schrodinger equation.
All right, then.
True. Blah blah blah. I would also point out there's a little weasel wording in here, since there's things we can't tell that scientists can't say about subatomic particles. But whatever, I guess that's just a quibble. But it seems question begging. It gives you the idea that there could be nothing else to know. And the biggest question of all is why are the quantum functions doing that at all? Why do they operate that way, and why do they keep operating that way? That's a question I have, and again, it's one you can't answer, I don't think. I mean, we have answers in the math for some things, but we can't say ultimately why are they there and why are they acting that way. Can I skip to number 2?
Yeah, you could go on to number 2. Yeah.
We already did number 1, so we summarized number 1. Firstly, it doesn't follow that because idealists are not in the context of, popular level videos using the Schrodinger equation does not mean quantum mechanics does not support idealism. Secondly, yes, we do use the Schrodinger equation to argue for idealism, either through, inequalities that prove non-realism, or through basic conceptual ideas of quantum mechanics that follow from the Schrodinger equation, or through, the fancy thing Dario was doing with calculating the density matrix, or the integrated information state from the density matrix that is given, that follows from the Schrodinger equation, or the wave function of it.
Okay, so number 2, I'll read it and let's hear someone comment on it. Quantum mechanics is philosophically antithetical to the entire idealist sense of epistemology. That's a broken sentence.
That's yeah. This.
And what do you mean?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
In fact, you don't even have to know quantum mechanics to know that Schrodinger and Heisenberg were not materialists. I don't know that they would have declared themselves idealists, but they were certainly not atheists, and they were certainly not materialists. And so they would have to be either some kind of realist or idealist or just confused. And I would even bet on confused myself. But I mean, it's totally false. Even Einstein at the end surrendered on realism. And all the big names in QM were not atheists. So there. Now maybe Johan's got some more technical things to say.
That's the funny thing is it's Max Planck actually deduced. He actually has a quote saying that his research into quantum mechanics is what led him to idealism.
And that's Planck. I mean,
it's the guy. We're crying out loud. And he's not. That's a very direct quote. I mean, the other ones, they may not say idealism outright, but they say things that are pretty close. Like Wolfgang Pauli referring to quantum mechanics as lucid Platonic mysticism. Heisenberg saying everything that matter doesn't exist. It's all the debate between Democritus and Plato is definitively decided in terms of Plato.
Not a single name in quantum physics that was part of creating it could you say was a materialist or an atheist. Yeah. Not a single one.
What he's saying, though, is positivism. It's a slightly different thing here, okay?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Let's read this over carefully here. Quantum mechanics is philosophically antithetical to the entire idealist sense of epistemology. That is because in order to effectively engage in quantum mechanics, you have to embrace several key principles of logical positivism. For example, the analytic-synthetic distinction is a big one, as well as a soft form of verifiability criterion for meaning. Principles, I might add, that Christian idealists are all the more than happy to reject at almost every opportunity. So once again, quantum mechanics cannot possibly support a single idealist argument because idealists themselves have already decided in advance to reject the core epistemic rules that govern it. No, this actually really sticks on me, really pisses me off, is that, okay, when they say positivism here, what they're saying is, this is the shut up and calculate interpretation of quantum mechanics. They're basically saying quantum mechanics gives us accurate empirical results, therefore we're not going to bother trying to understand what it actually means. Okay? It's so yes, if you adopt positivism and you add quantum mechanics, you can't get idealism out of it because positivism cuts off metaphysics, right? But science is never something that is, based on. You can't base science on positivism. Positivism is scientism, I think. So yes, when you strip away the scientism out of quantum mechanics and other theories, quantum gravity, for example, such that the instrumentalism is gone, and you just interpret it as literally saying what it means, it will reach idealism. So what they're doing with logical the way logical positivism or logical positivists can avoid idealism in quantum mechanics is by simply avoiding any metaphysical discussion of it at all. It's a cop-out game. It's literally saying quantum mechanics is not meant to be taken as a literal theory of reality, but just a useful tool to get empirical predictions, right? Therefore, we're not going to treat it as a literal theory of reality. So pretty much everyone knows that that's kind of a BS attitude to have about science. I mean, yes, you can do science like that in a sort of sense, but you can't derive any actual meaning or you can't derive any knowledge claims from it if you do that. And unless you're, trained to be a logical positivist, you're going to see right through that. There's no point in doing science unless science is referring to a actual real thing that has metaphysical existence in reality, Otherwise, you're just getting you're getting things that are useful at making predictions, but you're not getting anything that can relate to knowledge claims. And what we want out of science most is something that can give you knowledge claims about reality. So literally, what he's saying here, when I'm saying I'm rejecting logical positivism, me and IP and others are rejecting logical positivism, to get idealism, is that it's code word for saying we're treating quantum mechanics as something that's literally true, rather than just a useful tool. So it's quite ironic here because reality number 2 is.
Hello? You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Continue.
It's saying the exact opposite thing of what it's meaning here. It's that by rejecting logical positivism, we're taking quantum mechanics as literally true, and whereas he's saying this, and he's just saying it's a useful tool to get predictions and so on, and it's not something that has validity in its own right. Like it's not. Basically, if you attach logical positivism to something, that theory isn't true. It's just a useful tool. And furthermore, I'd like to add that this kind of thinking has had a very poor history in the history of science. Way back, Ernst Mach thought that atoms were mathematically useful fictions, right?
Right.
And they didn't really exist. They just were useful for making sense of patterns in the periodic table and so on.
I know people who make that claim now about all of mathematics. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing about it, well, not just mathematics, but this was actually a scientific, a theory, a conjecture that there are atoms, right? Well, now we have the electron microscope, and Ernst Mach, I mean, he's a great scientist, but on that point, he's got mud on his face, right? And what's interesting is the reason that he held that view was because of logical positivism. Now, what happens again is that exact same thing happens all over again. With quark jets. Quarks were invented, they were posited to explain particle symmetries. And the next thing you know, people were saying they don't really exist. They're just mathematically useful tools to, explain particle symmetries, okay? Well, they didn't learn the lesson from the atoms, and then, a couple years later, they have these particle accelerator experiments, and they find quark jets. You can't isolate the quarks, but you can see the effects of, you hit a single particle and suddenly it looks like it spurts off in 3 directions and then collapses back together again,
You're talking about the double slit experiment, right?
No, this is quark jets. This is particle accelerators where they
this is different.
Smash
Okay.
protons and antiprotons into each other, and they can then see the quarks. They're actually released because they're in confinement, but they will spray out from each other and then collapse back into each other, and actually see the effects of there being real quarks in the particles coming apart.
Oh, this is where we discovered when there were such things as quarks, and we can actually
physically and so quarks were
not
not just a mathematically useful fiction to describe particle symmetries. They were a real thing, just like this case with the atoms before it.
Right. Well,
likewise, some people are saying that emergent space-time should be treated in this instrumental fashion, right? It's just a way of describing things. I've even seen, unfortunately, William Lane Craig do that. I don't know why. I think he doesn't like the implications of it being outside space-time. But what's interesting here is, Hilbert space, right? That's just a mathematical space. And well, technically, yes, it is. It's just like a wave function is just a mathematical object. It's not an actual thing. But the wave function describes something that is very real in reality, which is the probability wave. And likewise, Hilbert space, which is the domain of wave functions, maybe Hilbert space itself is not a real thing.
John, I think you're breaking up here. John?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Listen,
Okay.
Let's try to wrap this up so we go on to number 3, okay?
All right, yeah. So the point here is that, if you take Hilbert space as describing something real, and you bring in the whole discovery now that, from quantum mechanics alone, that space emerges from Hilbert space, then we've just falsified physicalism. Within, if you treat Hilbert space, what's being described by Hilbert space as a real thing, that thing that's being described there is not a physical realm of reality. It's sub-physical.
Okay, can you sum it up in a short sentence of, to explain number 2 very easily?
Well, number 2 is just simply not treating quantum mechanics as a literal thing.
All right. So
It's saying logical positivism. They don't embrace logical positivism, and you should adopt that with quantum mechanics. Is to say that you should only ever treat quantum mechanics in an instrumental sense, and never as something that describes reality. So yes,
Okay.
if you stop short of describing reality with quantum mechanics, you're never going to reach idealism because you're not reaching reality. So of course he's not going to get to idealism if he's not even trying to describe what reality is with quantum mechanics.
there's also something else here that says that idealism themselves has already denied and rejected the core aesthetic rules that govern it.
Episode that's logical positivism. It doesn't govern it at all. The Schrödinger equation is what governs it. There's nothing to do with logical positivism. They don't want to take the implications of the theory seriously though, and so they hide behind logical positivism so they don't have to take quantum mechanics seriously.
Ah, I see now. All right. Let's move on to number 3, okay?
All right.
All right, let's start with number 3 here. Okay.
Shall I read it?
Oh, yes, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Quantum idealists constantly argue from authority in place of actual argument. It's so brazen, too, that you can almost make a drinking game out of it. Every time inspiring philosophy reaches some critical junction in his presentation, he almost never backs it up himself with any hard data. He just splashes some guy's face on the screen next to a self-supporting assertion, as if we're all supposed to simply take that guy's word as gospel on an otherwise highly controversial subject.
Oh my!
I wouldn't have that much of a problem with this either, if he at least just stuck with mainstream scientific authorities like maybe Stephen Hawking or Sean Carroll. However, several of his most key arguments are supported almost entirely by the object say-so of an completely obscure figure with no authority at all. For example, one name that inspiring philosophy loves to drop in his arguments is Henry Stapp. I don't know any nice way to say this, but Henry Stapp is a complete nobody, a spirit science hack whose only claim to fame is that he co-writes books with Deepak Chopra. The guy has exactly zero technical Okay, stop for a second here. Let's examine everything. Firstly, I can't speak for everything inspiring philosophy does, but firstly, actually, inspiring philosophy has backed up a lot of hard data in his videos.
Yeah, I was gonna say he has lots of hard data.
I mean, like quantum mechanics that debunks materials, and if you look in the description box of that thing, it's got peer-reviewed articles all through it.
You know, one time I sent a message to Anticitizenx of one of his pure evidence and gave it to him and showed him the evidence, and all Anticitizenx could say to me was, well, that's not pre-reviewed. That's it, basically. And when he get back about evidence, he's basically saying it doesn't work for me, therefore I deny it.
Well, that's the other thing I want to point out here. So they ask for peer review. They are always asking for peer review, and so I give them peer review. I'm probably one of the most peer-reviewed theists on YouTube in terms of how much I cite peer review. Or not you know.
Hello? You might need to change your mic here, John.
Yeah, John, you're breaking up.
Better now?
Yep, we're better now. Okay, just keep your mic the way it is.
Yeah, all right.
I would broadly like to comment on this guy is that he makes a lot of claims, claim after claim after claim, that are unsourced and unsupportable, and that automatically should be a problem. He says he's studied quantum mechanics, and he says he's taken both the graduate and undergraduate level. Just from the way he writes and the way he thinks, and the fact that he does not bother giving any real scientific credentials that I can find, but more to the point, just looking at the way he writes and thinks, he thinks and acts like an engineer, very much so. I may be wrong on that, but I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's very much the problem.
I use this all the time in my work. Well,
a lot of people in quantum mechanics, they've been trained to think like engineers rather than scientists, unfortunately, and it's because, they don't like bringing the metaphysical implications of quantum mechanics in. And if you try to force the issue as to what quantum mechanics actually means for reality, they'll get irritated by it. One example of this is, remember that poll that IP cited as to the nature of quantum mechanics with physicists? They had 6% say that, what was it, 55% said that the conscious observer plays a role in the mathematical formalism, aka the Schrödinger equation, and in the collapse of that, right?
Yeah.
But it plays no actual physical role, right? And 6% said it did, okay? Now, what's funny here is they're sticking with the math. They're saying that the math has consciousness causes collapse. That's the majority of physicists are saying that the math says consciousness causes collapse. But they then go on to say it's in the math, but it's not in physical reality. Meaning the theory that we have, this is, remember I went back to point number, this kind of ties into point 2 as well, right? Where they're taking the positivism and they're saying, we're going to accept that the math is telling us something, but we're not going to say that it's actually describing reality. We're going to drop short. We're going to get empirical results out of it that we can predict, but we're not going to we're not going to actually go the step further and say that it's describing reality, because if it does that, then that's going to mean that materialism is going to collapse, and the mind is going to have a fundamental role in the universe, and we can't have that because, well, we're dogmatic materialists. We don't like that, and so they hide behind positivism.
And I would point out that if you think like an engineer, you're building things, you're designing things. I mean, I have a friend who designs integrated circuits, right, and does a lot of stuff at the QM level. And he'll tell you, you could do, all sorts of useful, productive work all day without ever thinking about the metaphysical assumptions.
Exactly. Well, that's why
you just plug the math in and do it. I mean,
they don't want it. They don't. That's the thing, is they have chosen essentially to think like engineers because they don't. The whole point of science was to seek the truth, right?
Yeah. Oh, and my friend.
They don't want the truth here because the truth is going to poop all over their metaphysics.
And my friend who designs the IC chips is pretty much an agnostic, although he has some theistic views. But he basically doesn't think about these questions and doesn't find them very interesting.
You're going to find numerous physicists.
He's not hostile, is what I'm saying. He'll just admit, I can do this all day without thinking about any of those
things. There are
things.
numerous physicists who have that exact attitude. When you try and push it past that, they get irritated.
Yeah.
Jean, do you have anything to say? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to say something about Henry Stapp, actually. He called him a nobody, right? Oh, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page but there's some interesting things about that. He was invited by
who are we talking about?
Henry Stapp.
Henry Stapp. In 1969, Stapp was invited by Werner Heisenberg to work with him at the Max Planck Institute in Munich. He only wrote one book with Deepak Chopra in it. That's not his claim to fame. His claim to fame is has something to do with S matrix theory. I forget what that is. He is.
He's not a nobody.
Here.
If I'm not mistaken,
he's not a nobody.
He has some association with Pauli as well.
Wolfgang Pauli. In 1958, he was invited to work with him personally on.
He was his like yeah. He worked with him closely. He was like, yeah. He's not a nobody.
Yeah. No, he's not.
I mean, that sure beats out.
He's also actually worked in
Pauli and Werner Heisenberg. Those are the two. I mean, they're like 6 founding fathers of quantum mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's lots more, but
yeah.
Of the big 6 big names that everyone will stick out, Heisenberg and Pauli are 2 of them.
Are the 2 big
you
ones.
You don't get invited to work with them if you're nobody.
That would be true, yeah.
This is akin to being, under Einstein.
Yeah.
So he's not a nobody. He's
no.
And furthermore, it's funny because IP points out that this is not like a say-so. He's okay. Let's read this. However, several of his most key arguments are supported almost entirely by the abject say-so of completely obscure figures with no authority at all. It's not an appeal to authority. Here's what they're thinking: is that we're presenting arguments, as it were. I mean, yes, in a sense, we are presenting arguments, but in a different sense, we're just explaining. We're not presenting arguments so much as we're teaching. Okay, this is just the physics, right? You take the positivism away, which is an illegitimate bastard child, so to speak, and it's illegitimately stuck into quantum mechanics in the first place. So we address that number two. If we take that out, this stuff gives you idealism.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just we're just presenting the science as it is, minus the positivistic prejudice.
right. It's that's very true. I mean, we're not appealed authority just because it's some famous scientist. We're actually saying no. The studies and scientific evidence does
what
say
the science is. It's not even up for argument, for crying out loud. This is just the facts,
Well, it amazes me.
Another thing, what's funny is he said, if at least he stuck with mainstream scientific authorities like maybe Stephen Hawking or Sean Carroll. Well, I've used Sean Carroll in my videos a lot. I've used him to say that space is not fundamental. Well, space is the ground of physicality. If space is not fundamental, then that means physicalism is false.
Isn't that what Sean Carroll's been saying for a while?
Oh yeah, he's got a whole. In fact, what's funny is he's got a blog entitled "Against Space." Now, I want to briefly mention Tean here because he kind of critiqued me on this, where I point out that space and just some quantum information, and then that contrasted with the atoms and the void thing. The more appropriate example of this, okay, it's much cooler. You can look this up. There's a title, a blog by Sean Carroll that is entitled "Against Space." Okay, up in the upper right corner of the blog again, it says, "In truth, only atoms in the void." Well, the void. What's the void? The void is space, right? So he's literally saying, "In truth, only atoms and space," and then he immediately goes into the title of the article, "Against Space." So the against space part that's what the theory is saying mathematically, but then we're going to just ignore what the theory is saying and hide behind the screen of positivism to say it's producing it's a mathematically useful fiction, and then we're going to hold to our "in truth only atoms in the void" materialist philosophy anyway. So, in response to what Team M was saying there, no, I'm not saying Carroll is a moron because he's rejecting a science. Carroll's science is very, very, very good, okay? It's just Sean Carroll isn't seeing the implications of his own physics at the metaphysical level, which, me having a master's in philosophy degree, I do have some authority there, okay? I mean, Sean Carroll's a great guy. His physics is wonderful. I use it all the time. But I just happen to know a little more about the philosophic implications of it than he does. And that's not the diss on Sean Carroll. Yes, I said it was retarded because I was kind of ticked off at it their time, but
let's get back to the page here of not to interrupt you, but the page.
All right, go ahead.
So we finish up number 3, or do you just want to skip to number 4?
Where are we here? Nobody's spiritual attack. Okay, that's just bull crap, which we pointed out. Guy has exactly 0 technical publications involving any hard empirical data or rigorous mathematical analysis. That is an ad hominem. Instead of all of his publications are long-winded rhetorical arguments, the vast majority of them landing in purely philosophic journals and conferences. Well, you're talking about the philosophic implications of quantum mechanics, right? If you go beyond just the math and trying to understand what it means, well, of course, or what it's saying about reality beyond just the predictions, then yes, those predictions mean. Spurring philosophy is deliberately ignoring the entirety of mainstream quantum mechanics, choosing instead to build his entire case on the absurd ramblings of completely fringe crackpots. No, we're trying to ignore the entirety of positivist scientific posers who are treating quantum mechanics as an engineering tool rather than actually studying quantum mechanics. We're ignoring positivism on purpose because positivism has no business in quantum mechanics, and it's used as a smokescreen to hide behind hide away from the implications of quantum mechanics.
Yeah, just
quantum gravity.
Anticitizenx not showing any evidence to disprove what inspired philosophy is saying in the first place. Just saying, no, he's wrong because I say so.
These are simply, this is an appeal to authority here, and that authority, when we examine that authority is, you're going to adopt our positivism or we're going to call you a crackpot.
Yeah.
And why are you adopting positivism? Well, because we're materialists and we don't want to accept the implications of it. Okay, so then we have a circular, they're not gonna say this, of course, right? When you kind of press it, you can get these admissions out, and it's a circular problem, It's you should repeat, this is a runaround. You have to appeal to the authorities here on this. Well, the authorities are positivistic, well, yes, that's because it's materialism, and then therefore idealism is false because the authorities which are adopting positivism to avoid the idealist implications are saying so.
All right, let's move on to number 4, okay?
All right. What do we got here? The entire idealist argument relies on aspects of quantum mechanics that are known to be unresolved mysteries. For instance, what is the proper physical interpretation of the wave function? What constitutes a measurement? Do particles obey local realism or not? These are actively debated questions in quantum mechanics with no real consensus beyond the standard Copenhagen interpretation. All right, firstly, let's take a look here. What is the proper physical interpretation of a wave function? Well, they've shown that the wave function is real. That's been demonstrated in a proof, and it was peer-reviewed and so on. There is a real probability wave. What constitutes a measurement? Well, we can, that's really an illegitimate debate. I mean, yes, you can say it's not only minds that collapse wave functions, but I wish I had Trevor here because he could. I don't want to. I can talk most of the time, but I don't. I'd like someone else to. But anyway, I guess I'll answer this because I have some background on this.
Isn't a measurement supposed to be when you observe a particle?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What constitutes measurement? This is another smoke screen. Okay. Yes, we're ignoring the smoke screens because they are used on purpose to try and hide. So we're gonna expose the smoke screen. This whole entire video, not entire video, but the basic thing we're getting at here is to blow away the smoke screens. Yes. So what they're gonna say is, it's not the conscious observer; it's a measuring device that collapses the wave function, the photodetector, a screen, etc. Yes, that's correct. Now, that photodetector or screen or what have you is made of what? Atoms, right? Which are made of subatomic particles, which obey the Schrödinger equation, which have their own wave functions, which have their own composite wave functions. So until someone collapses the wave function of the photodetector or the measuring apparatus, that entire system of the photodetector and the particle itself are not collapsed. And you can keep on going this way. You can say, well, something outside, another measuring apparatus does this. Well, until that is observed, and that's also in superposition, right? And so on and so forth until you point out that it's relational to a particular reference frame, and then you ask, well, relative to the conscious observer's reference frame, what finally collapses the wave function? Well, logically, the whole chain of collapses, the von Neumann chain, terminates back on consciousness, right? So this is not to say that only consciousness collapses the wave function. That's a straw man. But what it is to say is there's this chain that will necessarily, if you treat quantum mechanics as literal, there's a chain that will go back to the mind. And right. They're treating this as a unresolved mystery. Why? Because they don't want to resolve the mystery. And if you watch Stapp's lecture on this, he points this out. It's literally taking the Copenhagen interpretation. Here's the thing. Let's check this one sentence out. These are all actively debated questions in quantum mechanics with no real consensus beyond the standard Copenhagen interpretation. Well, consciousness causes collapse is the standard Copenhagen interpretation simply extended past its positivism. You take it as literally true, and Stapp pointed this out. I have a whole lecture on him pointing this out, where the collapse of the wave function, if you treat this Copenhagen as literally true, then the notion of consciousness causing collapse is a logical consequence of it. It's just what it is, right? Here we go. Do particles obey local realism or not? Well, that whole thing was falsified. That's the whole point of entanglement and the Bell inequalities. And so that's not a debate. That's been settled a long time. Not only is that settled, but they've actually ruled out all the loopholes now too. So that's a done deal.
He also goes on to saying that it's a classic God of the gaps, whatever he's trying to start here.
No. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, and okay, I will give him a little bit of credit here. That part of the problem with it, okay, it's classic God of the gaps reasoning wherein some current hole in our scientific understanding of the universe inevitably serves as a breeding ground for supernatural explanations. Okay, what does he mean by supernatural here? It means probably beyond science, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, now, he's wrong, but he's not. This is one area where I'm going to give him a little bit of credit, because the reason he's wrong is because this whole notion was kind of it was a fault of this is like out of the theist sin, right? They've made the situation where they want to push God outside the natural on purpose, and make a dichotomy between the natural and the supernatural in such a strict fashion that it's either a scientific explanation or it's God being put in the gaps, right? So God of the gaps is basically an argument for we can't understand it with science, therefore magic that cannot be understood with science did it, right? That's not what we're saying. The entire point of this quantum idealism thing is to provide a naturalized theism. That's kind of what makes it unique in regards to all the other, apologist waves, is that we have a naturalized model of theism. So no, it's not there is a current hole in our scientific understanding of the universe, therefore God. It's we fill that hole in, and we know what that hole is, what's there. It's a completely scientifically explicable model of God or God's actions. There's
John,
nothing mysterious about it. Nothing. Hello?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Nothing magical or supernatural. I mean, there is supernatural in a different sense. It's the outside space-time, but not in the sense of beyond rationality, not beyond science.
It'd be a good idea that you send me some of your science, like evidence pages, any like that, so I can put them in the description below.
I did want. Maybe I should make a video on this. I was accused by another atheist of this, and I pointed out to him. He was complaining about this other theist he was arguing with about how he tried to put God outside of science and so on. And like, no, that's not what we're doing at all. My model is at the bottom level, the fundamental law of the universe is essentially a scientific description of God, or description of God in scientific terms. And so, no, John, this is not God of the gaps. It's not God or science. It's God is the scientific explanation, and God is not a magical explanation either. God is part of the theory in a way that makes sense.
And also, what about? He also goes on saying that there are reasons why scientists aren't jumping to accept idealism as a new theory of quantum mechanics, chief among which.
Yeah, this okay here. Okay, hold on. We'll get to number. We'll finish this, and we're gonna we'll tie this to number 5. Yeah, the reason they're not doing that. Remember, I pointed out the survey that was done before. 55% rejecting the conclusions of their own math.
Yeah.
That's why. The reason they're not jumping on board is precisely because they've been hiding behind the smoke screen of positivism, and they've been trained to do so. That's that whole positivism thing. We shear the positivism away, which, most of the average public understands positivism as baloney. It's internally contradictory.
So basically, they just don't like the results.
You can't verify the verification principle,
I'm sorry, do they basically just don't like the results of idealism? Is that it?
Oh yeah, and so they're hiding behind positivism. So this whole thing here is completely useless. Okay, number 5. Now, it ties in. He's going to try and let's just read this over. Let's pick apart what he's doing here.
Yep, I can take it away.
Idealists deliberately avoid making any hard, falsifiable predictions. Instead, all they do is accommodate. They're all more than happy to take prior existing data and then shove it into their pre-existing paradigm. But never do they make any effort to predict a single piece of hard empirical data that we didn't already know. Okay, first of all, let's take up the first charge here. It's actually not true that we're doing that. I mean, Dario had that model of idealism, from integrated information that was tying into the wave function of the universe. And Hoffman, for example, is working on a model that explains things in quantum mechanics better than quantum mechanics does, in a sense. He actually derived the Schrödinger equation, or not the Schrödinger, the free particle wave function from the interactions of conscious agents. He explained the reason for quantum spin, not just that it exists, from the interactions of conscious agents. So this is false. However, what he's doing here is suggesting that there should only be he's not leaving any room for even the slightest, most obvious metaphysical implications. So yes, some metaphysical implications are not going to be things that could necessarily be readily falsified. However, you can take things from quantum mechanics and pit them against the most basic, most obvious metaphysical truths, like things that are not that shouldn't be controversial, things that should just be accepted as properly basic truths. Put those two together, and yes, it's not a perfectly scientific argument, but there's literally no reason to reject it. I mean, you can't treat science as though it's in a vacuum from metaphysics. There's not to say that metaphysics is doing stuff that's outside science or is, magical or anything like this. It's just the two talk to each other, So, for example, we know realism is false, right? We know space is an illusion. That's all physics, right? I can even cite Sean Carroll arguing against space. He has a whole blog against space. And so if the world is an illusion, and you go back to Descartes' first meditation, right? What did he say about the world being an illusion? Anyone remember? What's the one thing that isn't an illusion, even if the world is an illusion?
Mind.
Well, yeah, duh.
Right.
That's a metaphysical statement. But it's the most obvious one. In order to reject that, you have to reject your own mind, right? My mind is an illusion. When you say my mind is an illusion, that's just nonsense, right? If someone says my mind is an illusion, if you reject that metaphysical claim, you pretty much remove yourself from rational conversation. Okay, you are a mindless zombie, and there's no sense in arguing with mindless zombies because everyone knows they're irrational because they don't have a mind to have reason, right? All right, so all we're doing is, there's a simple thing there. The world is an illusion. The mind isn't, right? Okay, well, maybe, so the matter isn't there. The only thing we have reason to believe is mentality. Now, maybe you can posit something else there to fill in the blank, neutral monism, or maybe there's some other substance that is not material or mental in addition to the mind, or something to this effect. But there's no logical reason to do that, right? If you say the world is an illusion, but your mind isn't, the first thing that pops into mind is Berkeley. I mean, it's just obvious. People will say Berkeley sounds crazy, but the only thing crazy about Berkeley is that not that he thinks the mind is real, it's that he thinks the world is an illusion. Well, physics has already jumped the shark there anyway, so it's not really a problem. The world being an illusion is just physics now. That's not up for debate, right? We have all the peer-reviewed data we need on that. We can count that in all we want, and so.
Okay, I think we should probably just keep moving on. I just realized that Max already left us.
Okay. So all we do is accommodate. Okay. So yeah, this is baloney. We do give empirical data, and furthermore, this rejects the most basic inclusion of metaphysical facts that should make the situation obvious. Even when they're actively trying to make predictions, they still completely fail. For example, I once placed this exact challenge to inspiring philosophy, and his only response was that if idealism is true, then the universe is a hologram. And he's complaining about post-dictions, and get used to it. I mean, there are physicists, string theorists that are saying that gravity is a post-diction of string theory, and so that's theoretical physicists are already doing that kind of thing. Okay, that's kind of silly. Now that might sound impressive to laymen, but inspiring philosophy doesn't seem to understand that people like me actually study this stuff for a living. Well, let's just break this down, shall we? For starters, it's pretty safe to assume that inspiring philosophy has no clue what a hologram is in any technical sense. I do. Okay. And I've made more videos on that than he has. There's a lot of mathematical baggage that comes with a claim like that. Yeah, that's fine. We're also interested in the metaphysical claims behind it. It's because we're not looking at the math in the lay-level videos that people can't understand the math doesn't mean that there's the metaphysical claims are false. And IP certainly hasn't been firmly trained in any of it. Yeah, well, I have, so bye-bye. Yeah. I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do, because he's hiding behind this smug sense of authority with his positivism, and well, I have some authority. I have some training in this, right? So I'm just gonna come here and crash their party, and I'm going to enjoy crashing their party, and where they're using this to trying to defend materialism. I'm not going to have it. So tough. I'm going to be your the troublemaker. Instead, it sounds more like you just picked it up from a bunch of spirit science websites and thought it sounded cool. Have you ever seen? Okay, you're talking about IP, but have you ever seen me argue from anything regarding spirit science when I talk about holograms, holographic universe in my videos?
Yeah, I've seen the one about holograph one.
Who do I cite? Who do I cite when I do that? And what do I talk about?
Let's see. Was it Michio Kaku or was it someone else?
It was Brian Greene and Leonard Susskind. And moreover, I talked about the physics behind it. I talked about the Bekenstein bound. I talked about black hole thermodynamics, and then how this led to the ADS-CFT correspondence. This is not spirit science. This is physics. Okay, I'm popularizing physics.
Well, once again, Anticitizenx just takes stuff out of his ass.
Yeah,
So
unless he's saying that Green and Suskind and Kaku are all spirit science people, he doesn't have an argument. Second, his prediction isn't really a prediction at all, because he didn't make it. Professional cosmologists and string theorists are the ones talking about the potential for a holographic universe, and experimental philosophy is apparently just running on their coattails. Well, if by running on your coattails you mean popularizing physics, then yeah, he's running on their coattails, but so what? Again, that's not prediction, but accommodation. Well, it's pretty obvious what the implications of the universe being an illusion are. Mind isn't an illusion unless you want to argue that you're a zombie. And, well, therefore the mind is more fundamental than the universe. So that's idealism for you. It's real universe. Okay. Third, nothing about quantum idealism has any logical connection to holography whatsoever. That isn't true. It's not true directly, but it is true that there's some connection. Namely, holography led to the discovery of the ER-EPR correspondence, which showed that wormholes equal entanglement, and from that it was shown that entanglement is more fundamental than space-time. Well, when you get entanglement, though, you can then tie in the mathematical implications of that. And if you look at Tononi's stuff, he described entanglement as a form of integrated information. It's a whole mathematical description of that, right? Now, what was funny actually about this, I want to point this out. I commented on this some time back, and he complained that I didn't know what I was talking about. I said, Rod, do you even know what a hologram is? What you just said forms any logical connection between idealism. None of what you just said forms any logical connection between idealism and that word. You're just spewing technobabble with no coherent rhyme or reason to it. So what's funny here is he says that I'm not making an actual physics argument, right? But when I do make an actual physics argument, and I then tie it to the math, right, which I pointed out, holography indirectly leads to the conclusion that space-time emerges from entanglement, and then we can use that to argue for idealism in a very rigorous mathematical sense, right?
Yeah.
And so when I go into a technical argument, what is that to him? Technobabble. He just mocks it. He hasn't provided a counter argument at all. He simply mocks it.
Yeah. Okay. What about?
You still made 0 empirical predictions that I can test and verify against some null hypothesis. Well, I just did make. The entire point was to lead to that prediction, calculating the phi content of the universe. All right, so this is stupid.
Go on to the next one, yeah.
Yeah, he's hiding behind arguments from ridicule and ad hom and appeals to authority here. That's pretty much all this is. Okay, just ask yourself, how does the assumption of an immaterial mind essence behind all of reality lead us to a universe where magnitude and phase information encode a 3-dimensional geometry onto a 2-dimensional surface? Well, I just linked them to you. The encoding of the phase information onto the 2-dimensional surface leads to ER equals EPR, leads to space-time emergence to entanglement, leads to idealism via quantum integrated information. Okay, where is the mathematical derivation of this principle? Well, I pointed out Dario had the kind of reasoning I just explained. He has worked out the exact math on that. Okay, so there is your mathematical derivation of the principle. Okay, quite literally, obviously there isn't any because inspiring philosophy has no clue what he's talking about. Well, sorry, I just blew you completely out of the water. You're just plain wrong. We already have the derivation mathematically, and actually Dario is actually working on a paper right now to publish on this. Fourth, how to measure holographicness of the universe? Where do I point my telescope, and what empirical data am I trying to observe? What is the predicted power, spectral density of the cosmic microwave background? How much redshift will type 1a supernovas produce, and what distance? These are types of questions that have meaning for empirical predictions and not some vague allusions to techno-sounding jargon.
It's also not something you can actually witness with a regular telescope.
Well, the thing about this is they are producing predictions from holography, and they're very good predictions. There's Verlind has been using holography to describe, gravity is an entropic, or not gravity, dark matter is an entropic effect. Entropic force, or dark energy actually. It got a calculation down to the exact order of magnitude. and this is not, this is very solid stuff, and it's just treating as though it's not even a sound hypothesis.
So what's the fourth one say? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That is the fourth.
Oh, that was.
Saying that we don't have predictions. We can't measure holographedness of the universe, and just point out that they are producing predictions to test this with. But hey, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe there really is something to this whole Sol's collapse wave function, cause wave functions collapse thing. So here's a challenge for all you quantum idealists out there. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is and submit your findings to an actual scientific journal, not some hack philosophical forum or spirit science conference, but an actual technical journal reviewed by experts in the field. I guess Max Planck isn't good enough for him, huh?
Well, I don't get this. This is all based on scientific reviews.
Exactly. It's retarded.
Yeah.
I'm
can look
working
this
on
stuff
some of this
up.
now. I'm working on some of this stuff now to get this stuff published in certain journals. It's going to tick people off. I'm tempted just to do this just to tell Anticitizenx to shut up on this.
Well, I don't get it. He's challenging people to look up evidence for this. I mean,
Yeah,
I can look it up and give it to him.
Moreland I have some connections with Moreland and one of his students, Miretu, on how to publish maybe inside tracks and publishing stuff. So I'm gonna work on this and get some stuff published so we can simply just shut him up when he says this. I know that I personally had no trouble publishing findings on my own in some exact same journals, so what's stopping you? Okay, honestly, guys, who's kidding who here? Quantum mechanics is notoriously difficult stuff, and it takes years of training in mathematics and physics just to scratch the surface. Yes, that's true. However, the intelligent layman can understand the metaphysical implications of it. I mean, you need, if you want to make predictions, exact predictions, yes, you need the math. But to understand the principles behind it, you can do that from watching Michio Kaku or Brian Greene on television.
Yeah, it feels like the Anticitizenx. Anyone who
he's hiding behind authority. I'm saying that as a person who understands both the math and the late level stuff.
Yeah, well,
I have a contention on what he's saying here. He's also saying that you don't have the ability to understand the mathematics and the physics without going to college.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's the appeal to authority. It's the appeal to, and I totally messed that up on them because I went to college and got the degree, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is baloney.
Yeah, it feels like anyone who first reads this is gonna think this guy's smart, but if you actually do look into quantum mechanics, you'll find out what he's saying. He's just pulling it out of his ass. I mean,
well, there's enough books on quantum mechanics, like written by the 6 that we talked about earlier, that even a layperson could understand it. And then you have books on the mathematics side, the differential equations and stuff like that public can actually have access to. So it doesn't even seem to me that you really need college to understand it. Maybe to actually work in the field, but to understand it, the knowledge is available to everybody.
Yeah.
That's why it's so easy to spot a bunch of idiot fakers like yourself, because you obviously have no formal understanding of the subject. Unfortunately, that's also why it's so easy to just pretend to be an expert anyway, because none of your fan base has the slightest shred of education in partial differential equations. I do. Remember that course. Linear system theory, same, or stochastic processes, same here. Okay. Yeah, so I do have education in that, so that pretty much blows that up. Everything about your quantum idealism argument is therefore only convincing to an audience that doesn't know any better. Thanks for reading. Well, if he means by knowing better, appeals to authority, hiding behind positive smoke screens, arguments from ridicule, etc., then sure.
I would challenge him and back up what he's trying to say. Not just.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're doing this video for. I mean, this thing is stupid. It's yes, these are the standard cop-out lines he's using from the physics department. This is how they avoid the philosophic implications of this stuff.
Right, Anticitizenx.
It doesn't work. It's a bunch of smoke screens they're using.
If Anticitizenx out there, he can go ahead and mix response to this if he wants to, or come contact us. We've been more than happy to.
Yep. Okay, unfortunately, now here. That's why it's so easy to spot a bunch of idiot fakers like yourself, because you obviously have no formal understanding of the subject. Well, he does have a formal understanding of the subject, but he's using that to be an idiot faker.
Right.
He's used that before. Here, let's see. Let's summarize the whole thing here. Okay, number one, he's hiding behind his appeal to authority and, simply false assertions in some way, right? Non sequiturs that quantum mechanics can't support idealism because they're not doing mathematical quantum mechanics. That's just false on both counts. It's a non sequitur that's the case. And number two, we are doing that. We're just not doing that, in public videos all. Then he hides behind positivism, trying to conflate positivism with quantum mechanics. That's a big red herring, and blowing that out of the water is, when you point that out, what he's really saying is he doesn't treat quantum mechanics as something that's literally true, just as a tool.
And that's actually supported within his article at the bottom in the notes. He actually has that quote from David Miller, Quantum Mechanics for Scientists and Engineers. And it basically says exactly what you're saying. That he's fitting it into the logical positive.
Where is that quote? Let me see that.
Because it's at the very bottom underneath the thanks for reading, under the notes. It's like the one citation he has.
Hold on, let me see here. Okay, the philosophical approach of dealing only with the questions that can be answered by measurement, or that are purely logical questions within some formal system of logic, and regarding all other questions is meaningless. Yeah, see, he doesn't treat quantum mechanics as something that's literally true.
No.
Yeah, it's the most common approach, but it's an epistemically erroneous approach, and you don't get knowledge that way. So yes, what he's saying is he does not believe in he doesn't believe quantum mechanics is a knowledge claim.
So why make this up in the first? Why is he arguing?
Yeah. If you understand quantum mechanics, then you know it's not a knowledge claim. Well, I'm going to blow that nonsense off. Yeah, the reason he doesn't want it to be a knowledge claim is because it's a knowledge claim that destroys his whole worldview.
Right.
And it's moreover a scientific one, and you can't just hide. When you can, but you look like an idiot if you do it. You can't hide behind instrumentalism to avoid the conclusions of science. So no, he's the idiot poser here who's pretending he knows. That he's the one adopting quantum mechanics, when in reality he's just admitted implicitly that he's not adopting quantum mechanics. He's in a superposition state of adopting and not adopting it at the same time here.
Yeah, that's basically to sum it up right now.
And then quantum mechanics constantly argue from authority. Look who's talking. Firstly, we shot that apart, but yeah, he's the idiot faker.
So before we end this, I wanted to do a 4-minute video that Anticitizenx made. I figured we should have like a short video on this podcast, and it's just gonna be a shoot for 4 minutes. So Max, where I left, he messaged me back. He told me that he had to leave and go to bed early. So that's why I left out the podcast a little early. Anyways, so right, we start with this video right here, right? So are any of you familiar with free will? Because I've been studying it from inspiring philosophy lately.
I have.
I haven't seen the video in question.
All right, then let's start the video then. And Jean, if you want to ask away, because you've been quiet most of the time, so
okay.
Let's start
I
with
really
this.
focus on free will much on my channel. I made like one video on it years ago.
All right. Well, here we go. It's only 4 minutes. It'll be really short.
That seems to slightly be plagiarizing South Park there.
What? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said that seems to be slightly plagiarizing South Park a little bit.
Oh, is that what? Oh, I don't know.
Terrence and Phillip type of thing.
All right, Johanna, I think you're breathing heavily into the mic. Like,
No, I'm not even on my mic. I'm not using the computer here.
okay, never mind. Let's continue with this.
Can't hear that at all.
No.
Go ahead.
Can't hear that at all.
You can't hear it?
No, it's like there's no sound.
Oh, you can't. It's on. Well, I think it's coming from Jahan. Like, Jahan, is there some kind of noises coming from you? I keep clicking it, so it keeps coming to
I'm
my
not
screen.
saying a word, okay? I can't hear anything, and I'm not hearing anything.
Can you mute your mic for a second?
Okay, sure.
It stopped right when you mute your mic, Jahan. It must be coming from you. Go ahead and turn it on again. Okay, well, I'll just start the video back here for a second here.
It's way too quiet.
Huh?
It's way too quiet. I can't hear
Way
it
too
sing.
quiet. Can you hear a thing? It's, hang on. Okay, here, try this.
Barely.
It must be your mic or something. I have it on full blast right now. Okay, here, let's go do this again.
For instance, time machines are obviously not an option because they simply don't exist and almost certainly never will. I also cannot accept an answer involving other immeasurable quantities, like the one which the soul has free will. Otherwise, we just have to repeat the entire experiment over again to figure out what a soul is and how to recognize one way to see it. So unless you're prepared to go down that road, then let's just stick to the question at hand. What set of empirical data would you need in order to objectively measure the difference between a thing that has free will and a thing that doesn't? Now, I've got to tell you, I've posed this problem before, and it is like pulling teeth to get a straight answer out of people, especially when it comes to Christians. For example, one very common response that I've encountered is the idea that free will is somehow immaterial and therefore cannot be quantified. And that's fine if you want to think that, but it's also an open admission that free will effectively has no meaning. You basically just told me that there's literally no way to differentiate between things that have free will and things that don't. I could just claim that rocks have free will or that Canadians do not have free will, and there would be no way to prove either of those assertions false. Then, on the rare occasion...
Now, I want to stop this right here. You guys can talk if you want to. You can unmute your mics now. Yeah. Now, do you have anything to say before I do?
Yes, I have a few things to say. The whole thing about the measurement of free will. Free will is a concept of we're able to make our choices. You know, that's the whole concept of it, is making choices. It's like more like a thought process than something that can be measured. It's
Jahan,
this guy gives me a headache.
I know how you feel. Jahan, you have anything to say? Jahan, you can unmute your mic now.
What is he saying there?
Wait, you didn't hear the video?
Yeah, it was way too quiet. Trying to.
I don't understand it. So basically, he's saying that you can say that the mind is immaterial, but then that's basically meaningless. You just basically have no proof of understand what it is. I could just say humans.
No, idiot.
Yeah.
Good grief, this guy is retarded. Firstly, we know matter doesn't exist. That's been falsified. Okay, we know from quantum mechanics that space is an illusion. If you don't agree with that, then you're just plain wrong, okay? Now, so no, we do know that the mind is immaterial because there isn't any such thing as matter in the first place, and that's not to say that we don't know what it is. It means immaterial things are the only thing we know that exists because it's the only thing that does exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole basic idea of free will is that we have an agent causation that allows us to choose, different outcomes. We choose it ourselves. And a lot of people always say to me, what causes the agent? Well, the agent's determined by itself, its own choice, Atheists always like to do that false dichotomy, is it determined or random? But no, the scientific evidence shows that our subjective experience is changing brain chemistry. I mean, you can look this stuff up from Jeffrey Schwartz and other different, and even neurology. Matter of fact, you should also know that there's no evidence that the brain chemistry is causing subjective experience. Nothing in neurology says that the brain creates the mind. There's nothing at that at all.
It's a physicalist assumption. See, see what happens is they assume that the mind has to be material, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, they originally said the mind correlates to certain parts of the brain.
Yeah, they're assuming materialism basically. It doesn't work. Here, let's continue on with the video.
Yeah.
Well,
Hold on. I was gonna comment there a little further. They then found out that you can have different brain states corresponding to different mind states, or the same brain state, same mind states corresponding to different brain states. Like the Martian feels pain, he has D fibers firing, whereas the human feels pain, he has C fibers firing.
Right.
So they then shifted over from identity theory, which says that mind states are particular, brain components, to minds are processes. Well, the whole framework for that assumption was that the mind has to be something physical in the first place, which is completely groundless. Now, they're probably doing that because you're rejecting dualism, but they didn't take into account the fact that, the brain doesn't really exist either, at least as a material thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, I have a question. With quantum computing and some of the people within mechanics is kind of postulating, that the brain may work more like a quantum computer than how we originally thought. And is there any validity to that?
Well, they did actually have a recent article that was published that was actually taken a bit more. This was like more mainstream. They were tying quantum biology. They noticed that when you had rats and you gave them a 2 times of lithium, right? One of the lithium was 2 different isotopes. Yeah, therefore one was like a heavier element. Chemically, the two are exactly the same, right? They bond the same. They do everything else the same, but they have different wave function frequency because the only difference is quantum mechanical. And they found that these 2 differences created behavioral differences in the rat, actually affected the rat's consciousness somehow. And so they were theorizing that there may be something similar in humans. It is a ubiquitous thing to consciousness, and so it has to do with entangled particles, atoms in the brain.
Okay.
It's hard. It would be hard to pin that down. I mean, we probably have a couple more, a decade or so of quantum biology. We probably will know more about that. But I mean, it's obvious. You can't. The mind isn't a process. I mean, the notion of the mind being a process is not even a coherent concept, right? Mind's a proper noun, not an activity. And
right.
You have other arguments like Searle's Chinese room. It's which are a priori, which therefore trump any empirical arguments you have. Not that empirical arguments are bad. It's just that they have to fit into a context. They can't trump a priori.
Oh yeah, I read the Chinese box experiment. Actually, It's supposed to show that our mind it's not based on semantics, so now semantics, basically like ones and zeros like a computer, right? The Chinese box experiments show we're not based like that, correct?
Uh-huh.
Right. No, I read about that. It's very well thought out, actually. But even today, I see atheists argue to say that's not true, and they've tried to. It's just so dumb. But anyways, let's continue on.
Yeah, they'll just assume their physicalism, and then they'll make these lopsided arguments to try and get out of this. And they're literally not taking the primary evidence of consciousness as primary. They're taking correlates, which is a post hoc argument, primary. So literally all they're doing is shoehorning and saying their shoehorning trumps a priori arguments, and therefore the a priori arguments are false, which is it's garbage, and it has to be thrown out because it's using a positivistic epistemology again.
All right, well, let's continue, okay?
All right.
Here we go.
Definition almost always refuse the following consistent. For example, most common definitions involve things like the ability to choose between different possible courses of action without coercion, or that, which is again fine until you realize that computer programs are also perfectly capable of reading that exact.
I have a different one.
Yeah.
A different definition. Starting a causal chain.
Yeah.
Mine's or free will is the ability to start a causal chain. That's the agent causation, and that follows on idealism as well as the Conway-Copen free will theorem.
Well, there's some problems with his argument that the computer now has free will, because a computer it only does things because of pre-programmed responses. It everything that a computer does is pre-programmed response. It doesn't actually do things on its own.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I don't understand how you think
it's not the start of a causal chain. That's the best way to. I think a better definition would be to start a causal chain.
Well, first of all, it's like the Chinese box thing, you know.
It would incorporate the without coercion thing because there's something causing it.
I mean, our minds, we can think about we are able to think about different things. A computer is a bunch of one and zeros. It doesn't know, what words we type into it or what color, what image on screen. It just knows ones and zeros. That's a terrible argument for what Anticitizenx is making. Anyways, let's continue on.
Go on.
That's fine if you want to think that too, but all it does is bring us back to the original challenge. How do I tell the difference between a thing with free will and a thing without? Why do sophisticated networks of neurons in the human brain get to have free will, but not sophisticated networks of silicon transistors? What's the difference? Because again, if you cannot tell the distinction between a thing with free will and a thing without, then there simply is no distinction between the word that has no tangible reference. I look forward to hearing your answers.
This is stupid. You should look up Cracking the Nutshell. She had a video on the Conway-Copen free will theorem and how it ties into the delayed choice quantum eraser. Because there's an actual. This is plain false, right? There is an empirical difference between the two, and there is a way of studying this from an empirical perspective with the quantum eraser experiment.
Yeah.
But moreover, I don't like his positivistic epistemology. It's like he assumes that just because something can't, at least at the moment, be studied in terms of empiricism means that it's false. So, firstly, there are ways to tackle this from an empirical perspective. I forget the video. Let me try and find the video she had on this. It's on uploads. Oh, here we go. Here. Do electrons have free will? The Conway-Copen free will theorem. Closing the free will loophole. I'll probably put that in. When I upload this, I'll probably put that in the description.
All right, then. Thanks. You can send to me as a message.
Yeah, so this is a hold on here. Yeah, so this is this is actually being studied. This is from an empirical perspective, but just to assume that it has to have that, it's stupid. Like it's I mean, yes, in that particular case, it might be the case because you can't tell the difference in the two, and these are choices being made in the actual physically observable world. Then of course there should be some difference, and there is, and it's the whole quantum eraser thing demonstrates that. But it's his whole positivistic approach. He completely dismisses any a priori analysis of anything, and the basic metaphysical. And not all of metaphysics is BS. I mean, some of it's just obvious, like your own consciousness, right?
Yeah.
I think therefore I am is a metaphysical truth that is or should be pretty standard.
Well, yeah, but he's just assuming physicalism or materialism, I should say. Actually, it's just thinking that the neurons in our brains the same thing as computer works that way. No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, idealism is supposed to show that there's quantum information. Nothing's exactly. It's the electron through the double slit experiment. That's the basic evidence for that. Correct. The idea that it's not physically there, at least not physically, but the quantum information is.
But no, the delayed choice quantum eraser has to do, and the associated Conway-Copeland free will theorem have to do with, does the particle's past cause you to measure it in a certain way in the future, or do you cause the particle's history to change? When you look at you change how it be.
Anyways, so far, Anticitizenx show no evidence whatsoever. And his logic's completely dumbfounded. If he wants to join us on podcast or wants to have a discussion, that's fine, or make a response, that's fine too. But in the end, everything he said, he just basically is pulling out of his ass. All right. Anyways, thank you, Jean. Thank you, Johanan, and for Max. He left early. He already messaged me. He had to go to bed. Anyways, thank you all for coming along, and see you next time. Bye.